African Ascent is honored not necessarily for the first time, but perhaps for the fifth or sixth time. I did not keep precise counts of how many times my guest whom I describe is one of the pillars of African Ascent. He's one of its funders. He's one of its participants. He's one of his supporters, and it's always an honor to talk to him, among other things. We're colleagues at Berkeley, but beyond that, we're also very close friends. He is my really literary and philosophical interlocutor, although he's a noted musician in his own right. At the expense of embarrassing him, I describe him as one of Berkeley's greats. A gifted composer, a great teacher, and as some of his colleagues describe him, a good soul, a good human being, which is very rare these days. So welcome to African Ascent, Professor Allen LeVines from Berklee College of Music. He is characteristically humble, so when we decided, because we're both curious, this is a virtue that I and him share, and we decided to embark on a journey of deciphering the poetic genius and mission and purpose and greatness and skills and talents of a Bohemian Austrian poet by the name of Rilke, who lived between the ages of 1876 and 1926. He died quite young. We both agreed that we're going to tell the experts who may be viewing this particular program, but also curious viewers, the numbers of whom is now rapidly increasing. I've been running African Ascent restlessly for the past 15 years. Do not be disappointed if we stumble on making mistakes, if our analysis of the poet are not on par. Appreciate the curiosity and the risks that we're both taking. One, a philosopher and also a professional writer, and the other one, a great composer, trying to understand the mind of a major poet, namely Rilke. Welcome to African Ascent, Allen LeVines. So my first question to Alan is going to be the following. Why Rilke? I know that you've done quite a bit of work. I don't know whether you have published in this area or not on Walt Whitman. I know you have worked very closely with Greenleaf. He even turned me on to it, and I think we did 1 or 2 episodes on Whitman. But you made a point to let our viewers know that you don't consider yourself to be an expert on Rilke, and obviously I'm not. But both of us are captivated by this poet. What is it that fascinated you about some of his poetic themes? Which poem or which poems? So what would you like to say about Rilke, just as a preface?
Sure. Well, again, your kindness is always too much kindness, so thank you. Thank you for your gracious words. And yes, we share a trait, a sort of insatiable curiosity. And so while I do not feel qualified to speak about Rilke in any scholarly way at all, I am absolutely curious to know more about him. One of my favorite and most influential mentors introduced me to Rilke. The composer George Crumb, and I am very grateful to him for having done so. He actually used a quotation from Rilke in one of his most important works, a piece he wrote called Music for a Summer Evening, Macrocosmos 3, and it's for 2 pianos. The text from Rilke is not included in the performance, but it's in the score. So that was my introduction to Rilke, and what drew me to Rilke in that first instant it was instantaneous. The impression was immediate. That he found a way for me of making darkness not darkness. And he found a way for me, it was very personal, of finding that in solitude, in even loneliness, and I think Rilke explores the distinction between loneliness, aloneness, and solitude. I think he, at least for me, he's made me feel there are distinct differences that are worth paying attention to. In any case, he made me realize for the first time at that young age that maybe being alone, maybe solitude, were not only not bad things, not negative things, but perhaps enriching states of being. So yeah, he grabbed me immediately in just the first poem I ever knew of his, and made me think deeply about ways of looking at solitude that I had not considered.
That is a wonderful metaphor. It took me by surprise. How little did I know that a composer that you admire has already introduced you to Rilke, and in that you know considerably more than you're allowing yourself to say. And the few remarks that you have made about solitude impress me quite diligently, that they're consistent with what I thought also. Thanks to him, I now know the distinction between aloneness and solitude, a distinction I think that is lost on most people. It was lost on me until after I discovered Rilke very late in life. And as I was telling yesterday, I wished that I had known his work 20, 30 years earlier, when I did not have to race against time. So that given the distinctions, I could have cultivated the character and the personality that I continue to attempt to cultivate, guided by the organizing principle of these appropriate distinctions between aloneness and solitude, so that I wouldn't unnecessarily suffer when I'm alone from something that should not be viewed as something that I should suffer from, but something that I should embrace, as a matter of fact, because aloneness is a necessary and sufficient condition for experiencing what he's calling solitariness, with this difference that most of us are conditioned to think that we should be unhappy when we are alone. But once we make the distinction between solitude and aloneness as a necessary sufficient condition, makes it possible for us to experience solitude. And once we experience solitude, then loneliness becomes a foreign element to human character, because what you're going to enjoy after you abolish the distinction between these two is the joy of solitude. Which I think for a musician of your rank is in fact absolutely crucial. I have been to your place, we've walked together, and I hope that the good Lord keeps us sufficiently long so that we can continue walking and thinking. It is during these walking moments, I think, we experience and embrace what we call solitude joyously, as a matter of fact. And in that, it is boring to think that just because you are alone, that you should feel lonely. Rather, I think it's an honor, in fact, to experience what you think is loneliness, which is not really loneliness, but solitude. How could the self be complete without this solitude? Because it's during these solitary moments that you carve out a character, a personality, when you learn how to be by yourself. Which, you know, people avoid like a dread, hence the clubs, the travelings, the parties, the talks that we have to give. I don't know whether I told you this or not. I don't like giving talks. I would not go beyond my television program that I really love. Beyond that, I'm not interested in traveling. I'm not interested in giving public talks. I enjoy being solitary, as a matter of fact. And once I discovered Rilke, Alan, he fulfilled me. I'm eternally grateful to this man. He has given me a different sense of life, how joyous it is to be by yourself.
How cool that he gave you that. That's wonderful.
Unbelievable. The best medication that I've gotten at this stage in my life, in fact, is Rilke and his thoughts on solitude. That's how much I love this man.
Wow, great.
So,
for the you brought up our walks as an ideal time for solitude. I haven't done any serious long distance hiking in a number of years, but something that I found fascinating. So in the past, I've gone backpacking where I would put everything in a backpack necessary for a week without coming out of the mountains and hike maybe 30, 40 miles and occasionally see other hikers on the trail going the other way. And usually I would be with another person. So we're talking about 8-hour days of walking and several days in a row of that sort. And even though I was with another person, we usually walked at a different pace. I tended to go too fast up the hill and the other person tended to go too fast for me down the hill. So we seldom were together, and yet we loved it, and we loved it because we experienced this ideal form, from my point of view, this ideal form of solitude. I mean, maybe at the beginning of a hike, we would be talking and be walking at the same pace, but within less than a half an hour, we wouldn't be together at all. We would be alone in the best sense of the word. And then maybe hours later, we would meet for lunch, and of course, we would talk and enjoy each other's company. But once we were back on the trail, we were very quickly no longer together, but in a really wonderful way, lost in our thoughts, or I'll speak for myself, my thoughts taking many different divergent directions in sort of a radial sense, and me not trying to control that, but embracing it. So yes, I think walking is a wonderful place to discover the best of solitude. Yeah.
That's solitude. That's right. And may I kindly ask you to read a poem or two?
Sure. I can't resist sharing the first Rilke poem that George Crumb introduced to me. I've read, one reason that I say I don't feel qualified to talk about Rilke is because even though I was introduced to Rilke many years ago, I did not continue to dig deeper and deeper into him. And more often than not, I tend to do that. If someone really grabs me, I will dig in as far as I can. And I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. But I have read other poems other than that first poem. And the first one, for whatever reasons, keeps coming back to me as just so powerful. So I'll share that one. It's entitled in English, it's entitled Fall. And he wrote it right at the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century.
Do you read German, Alan?
Not well enough. I should say no.
I was going to ask you to read it both in German and English.
Well, if I had known you wanted me to read it in German, I could, but I would want to practice my German a little bit.
Okay.
I have it in German, and I've explored it in German, and I think it, of course, is better in German. But I'll share it in English. And this translation is done by someone who I don't know, but I think they've done a good job with translating Rilke. Their name is Guntram Deichel. I've changed it a bit. I've looked at the German, looked at Deichel's work. I like it very much, but I wanted some things to be a little different. So it's a little bit of me as well.
Incredible. You are a literary editor at a certain point. There is the editor in you always.
It's hard to resist sometimes.
Remember my work, what you do with my work, even my emails, they are edited by you, Alan.
So this is Fall by Rilke. The leaves are falling, falling as from afar, as if distant gardens withered in the heavens. They are falling with a gesture of denial. And in the nights, the heavy earth is falling from all the stars down into solitude. We are all falling. This hand falls as it reaches out. And look at others. It is in them all. And yet, there is one who holds this falling endlessly, gently in their hands. And if I may, I'd like to read it again. I learned from a Japanese poet who I respect very much that we should always read a poem twice.
Right.
Hear it twice. The leaves are falling, falling as from afar, as if distant gardens withered in the heavens. They are falling with a gesture of denial. And in the nights, the heavy earth is falling from all the stars down into solitude. We are all falling. This hand falls as it reaches out. And look at others. It is in them all. And yet, there is one who holds this falling endlessly, gently in their hands.
Beautiful. I love the reading, the tone, the quietness. In my earlier years, I used to write poems.
You shared that with me very recently.
I did, yes. And I'm trying to go back to them now. because I loved writing. But then I turned attention to philosophy, to prose writing. But my prose at its best, when I succeed, if I ever do, is poetic. It's the poetic prose, a few lines, where I think I'm alive. So let's decipher the lines a little bit.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
Not at all. You want me to begin?
Please.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know the poem. I don't think I could know it as well as you do, it seems.
So I'm not sure, of course. That's just my impression. The leaves are falling as from afar, as if distant gardens withered in the heavens. They're falling with a gesture of denial. Is this metaphor yet? I think he's starting us out with a concrete physical image of actual leaves in the autumn falling, but he's quickly imagining that they're falling from somewhere other than the trees, that there's something more to their falling than just falling from trees, that it's almost as if there is a garden in heaven that's withering, and that's where they are falling from. And he says with a gesture of denial, I'm not sure how to interpret that, but perhaps because these leaves are withered and brown and no longer bright green as in spring or dark green as in summer, there's a loss of beauty perhaps from the point of view of these leaves. And so there's something opposite of positive in the gestures with which they are moving down. But then he expands it. And he realizes, I mean, especially for someone at the turn of the century who is aware of the relationship of the earth to the universe, to maybe not the same scientific degree that came later and today, but still knows that the earth is falling. It is literally falling. Our planet
is falling,
spinning, perhaps in control or perhaps out of control. It's moving. It is not stationary. And that movement, is that movement falling? Perhaps not, but for Rilke, it is. The earth is falling like a small little leaf from a tree. What a brilliant move from a leaf falling from a tree to the earth falling from a galaxy or from the universe, right? Brilliant. In the night, the heavy earth, and it's, he chooses to describe the earth as heavy, which is, that's a more what's what I'm looking for? That's a harder fall than a leaf, right? The weight of the earth is a more intense fall than that of a light leaf. But then there's this transition. It's falling, the heavy earth is falling from all the stars down into solitude. And for Rilke, the word solitude is perhaps infinitely potent in terms of what's there to explore. And so now he's opened it to infinity in some sense. Not that he equates solitude with infinity, but that the potential for solitude is enormous.
Wow.
And then he directs it to humanity. So it had nothing to do really with humanity, right? It's about nature, it's about leaves, it's about fall. And then it's about the earth and the stars. No human beings are there, but in the second half, he says, we are all fallen. And then he makes it very personal and says, this hand or that hand is falling. Which hand? I don't know. Is he looking at someone else's hand? Is he looking at his own hand? I think, again, this has to do with looking at the German. I think he's not talking about his own hand. He's talking about another hand from another person. I think it's a stranger. I think it's someone he doesn't even know. One other person from the sea of humanity. And he says, we are all falling. This hand, that hand over there, out of millions, is falling as it reaches out. And he says, and look at others. Look all around you. We're all falling. And that is so magical to me in terms of where he started with the leaves falling. Because if you hit an autumn day on the right day, you see what seems to be infinite leaves falling in every direction all around you, if you're in a place where there's enough trees to be able to have that experience. So it's wonderful how he ties it in that way, I think. But then the ending is the magical twist for me. And yet, there is one. I think for Rilke, this is God. There is one who holds this falling. How can you hold something that is moving, right? But this one is able to do this. This one holds this falling. This one who holds this falling endlessly, gently in their hands. And I love where he places endlessly and falling and gently, because we can interpret it to say that the falling is endless. It never stops. On the other hand, we can say that the holding is, the gentle holding is endless. Both are possible. And perhaps, I think, probably Rilke wants both to be true, that the falling is endless, but the gentle cradling of the falling is also endless.
Incredible. I am on a very dangerous ground here.
We both are. We both are on dangerous ground.
Okay. And
I just spoke about Rilke as if I know what I'm talking about, and it's what it means to me, and that's all I can say. I'm sure I am far from what maybe a Rilke scholar would say, but that's all right.
I hope that you're going to be lucky in Melrose and in the area in which you live, because Afghanistan travels very widely. If we're lucky, maybe a certain Rilke expert is listening to us now, and I'm hoping that we'll get feedbacks in some shape or form.
Absolutely.
What I was going to say, I'm sure you know Joyce. In one of his masterpieces, short stories, which is my favorite by Joyce, called The Dead. The last lines are on snow falling, 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 falling. It ends. I wonder if Joyce also had a similar mood of falling. He repeats it several times. Snow is falling.
Yes.
On Ireland.
What was that?
On Ireland, snow.
Yes, yes.
Falling all over Ireland, he says.
Yes.
And the essay is called The Dead. I just wonder.
I'm unfamiliar with this particular essay.
Yes, I just wonder. And now, another thing for which you may not be prepared, but if I can indulge your kindness, that really revolutionized my idea of love is Rilke's contention poetically. That for him, love is not a merging of two human beings, he says.
Yes.
But it is a distance that cannot be surmounted. So to fall in love with him is not to be measured by the degree and closeness of the merging. On the contrary, it is to be measured by the degree of the distance.
Yes,
Amazing. What are your thoughts? I was enraptured by this.
I think he. I mean, if I remember, I've read the sentiment that he has about that, and if I remember, at least how I read it was that two people who are in love or think they are in love.
There is a difference, isn't it?
Or hope that they are in love.
That they are in love.
Right. That they're probably going to struggle mightily if they fail to realize that there's a great distance between them. And Rilke's view is this is true for all people. We are all at a great distance from each other, and that is the state of being. That is part of being human, is that we are alone, and that aloneness is because of this great distance between us. And I don't think he judges it as bad or good. This distance is not something that's bad. It's not something that's good. It's just a fact from his point of view. And I think that if we are not fearful by that notion, if we're not afraid of that, and I think the immediate reaction is to, oh, that's a horrible thing to say, right? That might be the initial thought. But if we're willing to be open to the possibility that it is neither good nor bad to consider that we have this great distance in all of our relationships, we might begin to see that he's onto something.
Yes.
In such simple things as a conversation where both people misunderstand each other. We misunderstand each other because there's so many differences between us. And the many differences between us, Rilke is describing as distances, things that are keeping us apart. Right? So going back to what you were mentioning, so of course the relationship that we have where we crave for that distance not to be there, and we perhaps delude ourselves into thinking that we have collapsed that distance, is when we feel like we are in love, right? Or when we know we are in love. And we may be absolutely correct that we are in love, but we are probably incorrect in thinking that we've collapsed that distance.
Precisely.
And so if we are aware of that distance, and if we accept it, and if we explore it, and even embrace it, and if both people, if both people accept this distance, acknowledge it, accept it, explore it, and even embrace it, now you are beginning
to understand,
to find love.
Exactly.
Those two people are at that point beginning to find love. I think that's what he's saying.
He said it absolutely brilliantly, and I mean it. That's exactly my sense of it. And additionally, he says towards the end, if there is anything difficult, he cannot imagine anything more difficult than love, than understanding love.
Yes.
Imagine the implications of this for what we've done with the idea of love. We even dare to think that we are in love and soon we're going to be out of love, although we were never there to begin with.
Right. Yes. No, I think he...
You see the point, Alan? It's amazing. He shames you to assume that you're out of love now. It's to assume further that you are in love at point A, and now at point B, you're out of love. And yet you have not experienced love, because love is something that you learn.
Yes. You definitely aren't born with it.
Oh, we talk about chemistry. I said to myself, my God, what humanity is not understanding.
Yeah.
I told this to my students today, and I think they were shocked. I lovingly essentially told them that you have not been in love yet.
Yeah. I can't remember right now who said it, but someone in defining love, I remember this because I thought it was definitely in the right direction. It was a psychologist or psychiatrist who said love, meaning real love, that really it isn't self-love, it isn't desire, it isn't lust, it isn't neediness at all. True mature love, that's the word. True mature love requires courage, it requires effort, it requires extraordinary effort.
Extraordinary, yes.
And it is a willingness to extend oneself. A choice. That's what it is. It's a choice to extend oneself. And when he talks about extending oneself, he's talking about going to a great deal of trouble.
And Alan, your favorite poet, Whitman.
Yeah.
Was
Maybe
also
not my favorite necessarily, but certainly
yes,
among my favorite.
among your favorites, to speak precisely. Was also aware of this phenomena because there is a short poem, very short, 2 lines about love, in which he says, a certain love was unrequited, but precisely because it was unrequited, precisely because it wasn't consumed, I learned something, he said. I'm now going to write songs for you.
Beautiful.
I might not have been loved in return, he's contending, but the fact that I wasn't loved in return becomes a subject for the possibility of becoming a poet. I'm going to write songs. In short, I have benefited something.
Yes.
I might not have benefited from the romantic dimension, from the idealized romantic dimension, but I have certainly benefited from it. The power of literature.
Absolutely, yeah.
Amazing.
Great. A lot packed into very few words.
In 2 lines.
Yes.
That's all he said.
Yes.
He didn't cry. He's not bitter. He wasn't loved in return. He said, no, the fact that I wasn't loved in return now has empowered me to write songs for you.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, thanks. Thanks to you. We still have 12 minutes left. We've been allotted 1 hour. I wish you could read us one more poem, if there is one that you would like to read by Rilke, one that is available just for our pleasure. We might not have time to decipher it,
Sure.
but we can at least enjoy the reading.
Sure. If I may, before doing so, I'd like to share a few thoughts that came to mind as I was looking at some more Rilke for our conversation, and we had said that we were interested in talking about his insights into both loneliness or solitude and love. And and I think that I already shared that I think that he brilliantly makes distinctions between loneliness, which subjectively is negative, and solitude, which subjectively is positive, and aloneness, which is an objective state of being. So I think he also does something similar with love. I think he explores loneliness, aloneness, and solitude. But I think he also explores romantic love, but not just romantic love, also love of humankind, which is a very different way of loving. And then finally, and I think in the poem that I already read, he touches on this third kind of love, and that is a kind of godlike transcendent love.
Wow.
So I think he, when he grabs hold of something, he likes to break it down and look at it from different perspectives, different angles.
That's the analytic power of poetry. And great poets are very analytic.
Yes.
And hair splitters. For Aristotle in philosophy, thinking for him is hair splitting.
Yeah.
If you can split hairs, you're certainly thinking very distinctly, very clearly, very carefully, slice by slice, part by part. Jumbling, putting things in one basket, which I don't like myself.
And then just today, my best friend really shared, because they knew I was going to be talking about. In fact, I asked their advice. What am I going to say? And shared so many wonderful things, but one of them was so perfect that I want to share it. It's a quote from Rilke that is perfect for a conversation about both love and loneliness.
Yes.
It's a very short statement by Rilke, and he says, "Love is two lonelinesses that greet each other, touch, and protect each other."
Beautiful.
Love is two lonelinesses, or two entities, two people who are alone, right? Love is two lonelinesses that greet each other, touch, and protect each other.
Amazing.
I think that's, I just, speaking of packing a lot into very...
Exactly. It's remarkable. Yes, yes.
So let's see, another poem you asked for?
Yeah, if you don't mind. With that, we can end our episode.
Sure. So this is from the Book of Hours by Rilke. It's really special. I looked at a bunch of translations, and I just kind of, it's a patchwork of different translations, including a little bit of my own. Here we go. If only just once it were silent, if the murmur of randomness and ambiguity hushed, and the gregarious noise diverging the sound my senses make did not keep me from awakening, I could devote my thoughts to you 1,000-fold, thoughts to the very margin of your thinking, and possess you for the instant of a smile, then give you all that lives as thanks.
Remarkable.
May I read it again?
Yes, please. The rule, remember, twice.
Right.
I have internalized that rule.
So this could be, I think it's a love poem, a romantic poem, but it could just as well be a prayer. It could absolutely just as well be a prayer. If only just once it were silent, if the murmur of randomness and ambiguity hushed, and the gregarious noise diverging the sound my senses make did not keep me from awakening, I could devote my thoughts to you 1,000-fold, thoughts to the very margin of your thinking, and possess you for the instant of a smile, and then give you all that lives as thanks.
Incredible. Oh, as a because the episode was marvelous, and because he introduced me to Whitman, whom I think is really his soulmate, I want to read a poem by way of ending this episode from Leaves of Grass.
Please, by all means.
If you allow me. I saw in Louisiana a live oak grown, is the title of the poem. I saw in Louisiana a live oak grown. All alone stood it, and the moss hung down from the branches. Without any companion, it grew there, uttering joyous leaves of dark green. and its look, rude, unbending, lusty, made me think of myself. But I wondered how it could utter joyous leaves, standing alone there without its friend near, for I knew I could not. And I broke off a twig with a certain number of leaves upon it, and twined around it a little moss, and brought it away, and I have placed it inside in my room. It is not needed to remind me as of my own dear friends. For I believe lately I think of little else than of them. Yet it remains to me a curious token. It makes me think of manly love. For all that, and though the live oak glistens there in Louisiana solitary in a wide flat space, uttering joyous leaves all its life without a friend, a lover near, I know very well I could not. This has been your host, Theodros Kiros, for African Ascent. Until next time.